Welcome to the third video of the series on how to create a 3D game using Typescript and Three.js. In this video, we're going to create the player tank class. We will use the resource manager we created to load the needed files to finally show the 3D model on the game. I have created this model using Blender, and you are free to use it however you like. It's important to know this model is made up from two meshes, the body and the turret. This is important, because once we load the model on the game, we need to know this information. This time, we will prepare the assets before creating the player class. To do so, we will create two maps, which are basically dictionaries. We will later access the models and textures by the name or key. In Three.js, models are stored as GLTF files, which is a standard format for 3D scenes. Notice the GLTF object is located in the example folders on the Three.js library. We will first create a method that will load textures and store them. We are familiar with this because we did it for the map ground textures. Although we should be using one method for every texture, I don't want to complicate things too much. We can use the loader we defined before to load the textures. Once we do it, we store them on the map by assigning a unique key. We will use this key later to retrieve the texture we want. We will now create a method to load our models into the game. Remember that GLTF files describe a 3D scene and not just a model. We will see how to access the meshes we want later. Like with textures, we store the loaded scene by assigning a unique key into the dictionary. We will now create methods to access the resources we loaded. It's important to notice these methods can return undefined, which can happen if the required resource is not on the dictionary. With all the resources ready, we can now focus on creating the player tank class. We will extend from gain entity and create a default constructor. Since the resources should be ready, the load function will focus on creating the meshes and materials for the tank. As I mentioned before, GLTF objects are really a scene that can have a number of child elements. We know our loaded scene has two meshes, and we also know their name. We can use the JavaScript find function to get the meshes we need for the tank. In this case, we will build the tank by accessing the body and turret meshes. The name of these meshes are set on Blender before exporting the scene as GLTF. Now that we have the meshes and the textures, we can create and assign the materials. Once again, we are going to be using the mesh standard material and set the map property to the corresponding texture. Just like we did for the map, we assign the materials to the meshes. The only difference here is that instead of creating the meshes using geometry, we got them from the exported Blender file. We are now ready to create our final mesh for the tank. The way we do it is by assigning the meshes we just created into the class mesh property. We are now ready to see the tank in action. Let's go to the game scene class, and on the constructor, let's create the player tank object. Remember to add it to the list of entities. To make it easier to see, we will place the tank just in front of the camera. Remember, we are seeing the game as if it was a chessboard in front of us. Let's run the game and see how this looks. If we did everything correctly, we should see the tank model just in front of us. In this lesson, we saw how to make use of our resource manager to bring the assets into the game. Later, we use those assets to create the player tank object. In the next class, we will see how to use the keyboard to move and rotate the tank. I hope you are enjoying and most of all learning from this tutorial, and I hope to see you in the next video.